All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Sponsor Spotlight series. This is our fifth one this year. If everybody could put your name and organization in the chat box when you have a chance. And then also throughout the presentations today, any questions that you may have, feel free to put them in the chat. And we will ask questions after each presenter and also at the end where people can take their mute off, put your camera, video on if you'd like, and say hello and ask your questions. But during the presentation, if you don't mind, please keep your camera off and silence your microphone during the presentation. As I mentioned, this is being recorded. We typically put our Sponsor Spotlight Lunch and Learn presentations on the Detroit 2030 District YouTube channel, as well as some of our other best practices group like multifamily and houses of worship. We put those on, on our YouTube channel, as well as our building member meetings. So with that, I just wanted to introduce our two presenters today, Sam Tillman from Duralast and Dan Henderson. Welcome. We're happy to have you. And before we get started with your presentations, I'm just going to give a quick overview of the 2030 district. Make sure you can see this. There we go. All right, so we are growing. I think most of you are familiar with the Detroit 2030 district, but those who aren't, we are now at over 51 million square feet of commercial building space that have committed to our program. We also have over 40 local businesses that sponsor us. Those are our professional stakeholders, like our presenters today. And we also have over 40 community stakeholders that we partner with, which are other environmental nonprofits. So we have over 400 buildings now in Detroit that are participating in our program, and we continue to grow. And those building members are really taking the lead on Detroit becoming a more sustainable city. Next, so we are part of a national movement. There are 24 2030 districts across North America, and we have 3 in Michigan, which is great because I think that's the most of any other state, Ann Arbor, Grand Rapids, and Detroit. Let me go to the next slide here. And if you're not familiar with what the 2030 district does, we're aiming to support our building members in reducing their energy and water consumption. And we help them also reduce greenhouse gas emissions from transportation to and from those buildings as well. So what we're looking at is the baseline energy and water usage and helping those building members reduce by 50% by 2030. Next slide. So how can you join the 2030 district? We do have 3 membership types. Our property owners and managers can sign up to become building members, and it is free to them. We are a nonprofit, so all of our resources are focused on our building members and supporting them in their goals. And then we also have professional stakeholders. Those are paid memberships, and those are our stakeholders that believe in the mission of the 2030 district and support us with funding. And then we like to highlight our professional stakeholders at some of our events like today, and also bring some of these topics that we think are going to be helpful for our building members to everyone. And then lastly, we have community stakeholders, which I already mentioned. Those are other like-minded environmental nonprofits in Detroit that we partner with. We do have 3 best practices group. Venue Museum is a national group now, houses of worship, and multifamily. These groups meet about every other month and focus on some of the challenges that their building type face. So it's been really successful getting similar building types together to have some of these discussions. And I did want to mention, several of you may have been at the first annual awards breakfast for the Detroit Energy Challenge. It was in June. The Detroit Energy Challenge launched in 2020, but due to COVID, it was postponed. So we relaunched it this year, and we had a big celebration in June where we awarded the top 5 biggest losers in Detroit. And those were the ones that reduced their energy consumption the most from 2019. We did partner with the City of Detroit and Michigan Battle of the Buildings, and we will be continuing this annually. So look for updates from us between now and the end of the year, because any building that would like to participate will need to submit their building's energy data before the end of February. The exact date will be out shortly. And we are very excited to be hosting the Detroit 2030 District, I should say the 2030 District Network Summit, which happens each year. Connie's been working on this. This will be her 3rd year she's been working to get this in Detroit. She had to cancel the first 2 years due to COVID. So we're very excited to welcome all of the districts across North America to come to Detroit, where we'll be hosting them for a few days. And we do have a couple of public events. We have a welcome reception on Tuesday, October 4th in the evening at the Zero Net Energy Center. And so we also are going to be featuring Liesl Clark as our keynote speaker. And we have a number of sponsors that we appreciate their support for this. So we hope you can join. These are some of our professional stakeholders that I mentioned earlier. And last but not least, I think I've already touched on this, but how can you join this movement? You can add a building into the program if the building's located in Detroit. You can become an event sponsor or a professional stakeholder, or you can volunteer with us. So feel free to reach out to myself or Connie. There's also an opportunity to become a member of all 3 districts as a professional stakeholder or community stakeholder. So again, just reach out to us. And these are all the different ways that you can follow the Detroit 2030 District. So before I turn it over to our speakers, I realized I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Kendall Kuhneman, and I am a program manager with the Detroit 2030 District. Connie is usually the one who's presenting these. She's out this week. So I'm managing just a few different pieces here. So thank you for being patient with me. But I'm going to turn it over to our first presenter, over to Sam. Sam, let me stop sharing my screen and let you share yours. And then if everybody can turn their video and put on their mute until the end of the presentation, I'd appreciate that. I'm going to give a little intro to Sam while he's pulling up his screen, but a description of his presentation, which is going to be on cool roofs for a hot planet. So today's cool roofing systems are a significant platform for urban building sustainability. This presentation will discuss ways that cool roofs can combat the heat island effect and many benefits of cool roofs to the building owner and the key design aspects to consider for a cool roof. Sam, looks like your slides are ready, so I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kendall. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everybody. First, let me start by saying thank you to the 2030 District. It's so amazing to see everything that you all are doing and working on to make us, better, more sustainable communities. And thank you for putting these on. It's such a great opportunity to be able to present. My name is Sam Tillman. I am with Duralast Roofing. We are a commercial roofing, PVC, single-ply roofing manufacturer, headquartered here in Michigan, the only roofing manufacturer headquartered in Michigan, located up in Saginaw, Michigan. I mean, we specialize in low slope and flat roofing, and our go-to-market membrane is our white cool roof. So that's who we are. So let's jump in and kind of talk about cool roofs for a hot planet. So what is a hot planet? We have kind of live in a greenhouse of sorts. We hear everything in the news and in politics and everything about global warming or global climate change and everything that's going on. And one of the things 2030 District has been doing and so many other organizations is looking at how do we combat the effects of things like heat island effect or global climate change. So kind of what the hot planet is how the atmosphere traps heat up under the sun and keeps it here and keeps constantly warming the earth. So the U.S. Department of Defense considers climate change an urgent and growing threat to our national security. That kind of sets the stage and tells you how important this is to us as a country, that we've now considered it a threat to our national security. So a little more on kind of hot planets. 97% or more of actively publishing climate scientists agree climate warming trends over the past century are very likely due to human activity. In addition, most of the leading scientific organizations worldwide have issued public statements endorsing this position. Now, most of what we talk about when we talk about the effects by human activity, it's related to things like car emission or the buildings that we're building, the materials that we use, creating heat island effects through concrete, removing of green spaces to help clean the air and things like that. So there are a lot of things that we can do as we look at how we operate as humanity to help combat or at least slow this process. So the biggest thing that we look at is the urban heat island effect. And what the urban heat island effect is, in short, is how our urban cores can instinctively be warmer than the surrounding suburban or rural areas. So if you look at the chart on the left of your screen, in the middle of it, you'll see a couple of buildings. The graph you see shows kind of the average temperature of that urban core versus the surrounding areas as you go from the urban core to commercial to urban residential out to your suburban, even your rural areas. And you'll notice the more you move away from these urban cores, or sometimes referred to as concrete jungles, you'll see that the kind of average temperature can change. So one of the things we look at is on reducing the effect of this urban heat island effect. And that's one of the things that I believe 2030 District does great, is working at combating some of this stuff. One thing to note is that 56% of this effect is due to less vegetation in the urban lands compared to in your rural lands. Dark paving, so when we look at our asphalt parking lots, our asphalt roadways, those darker surfaces tend to be hot. I do have a graph that you'll see a little bit later that shows a thermography image of a piece of property showing the building and the parking lot. So you can see how hot that pavement is in compared to, let's say, the vegetative grass or trees next to it. And then lastly, 38% is directly attributed to dark roofing. There's a couple of different kinds of dark roofing that you'll see out there, from black single-ply roofing membranes to old school tar roofs, or some of our built-up roofs that have black coatings on top. So understanding kind of what the heat island effect is, how it occurs, how it affects us, we have to begin to look at what are some of our solutions to heat island effects. One of the things that I'd like to point out is that most solutions we have are not quick, short-term solutions. Some of them, their benefits and their effects take place over a longer period of time. So it's more of a long-term strategy. Adding vegetation can definitely help your roofing system and help the ecosystem. However, it's a long-term. It can require up to 10 to 20, sometimes even 50 years to completely reap all of the benefits of adding these new vegetative roofing systems. Other things you can, like replacing dark pavement with some of the lighter colored pavement. Maybe it's going from asphalt to concrete, which may be a lighter color. That can help as well. Or replacing some of your darker roofing units to more cool roofing units. Now, on direct temperature, it has effect, but it also has other benefit to your building and its equipment, which I will kind of cover a little bit later. So, cities growing, cities getting hotter. Cities are growing, of course, at an incredible rate. I know here in Detroit, we've just been seeing astronomical economic growth. There's new buildings popping up in the downtown area. in our kind of suburban area or just outside our downtown area, we're seeing new strip malls, new apartment complexes, new residential units, and there's so much growth that's happening. But it does sometimes have an effect on, say, heat island effect or heat trap within our communities. So if you look at any particular landscape, roofs can be about 25 to 30% of the total city area. So if you're looking at it from the sky and you're looking down and you see all the buildings and the rooftops and the parks and the fields, about 25 to 30% of it is probably made up. You're going to see the roof of some sort of building. Now, with that being said, we can look at these roofs as also being part of the solution towards hot cities. Roofs tend to be replaced typically more often than you'll do a complete retrofit of a building. So you may have a building that's built and historically you may have to replace the roof 10 to every 15 years. And of course, now we see more 20, 25, and 30-year roofing solutions. But typically you're going to replace that roof 2, 3, 4 times before you actually completely retrofit the outside of the building or tear the building down and rebuild. So with that, your rate of change with changing out your roof can be relatively quick compared to just changing out all of your building needs or all of your building aspects and components. So with this slide, what we're looking at here is a case study. If you look at the picture at the bottom right, you can see what the building is. Above that, you will see the infrared scan or the thermography image of this particular property. You can see this particular building has a white roof as well as some dark roofing section. You'll see the darker color pavement as well as the green vegetation of the grass and the trees. So Northfield, Minnesota, it was about 83 degrees outside. So when you look at this thermal image over here on your right, the first thing that is going to note is the temperature of the white roofing membrane. Now, in this particular reading, it got that the white membrane is about 89 degrees, which is about 6 degrees warmer than the ambient air temperature. I'm actually a certified thermographer. I do probably way more thermal scans of roofs than I ever really want to every year. And I can tell you, typically, a white membrane roof is usually only about 2 to 3 degrees hotter than the ambient air temperature. If you look at your darker roofs, for instance, which is what you can see in the middle square, it would be the black section or darker section on the building. If you're looking at the regular image below, you'll notice that that built up roof is about 115 degrees Fahrenheit. You know, I'm no math major, but that's a little over 30 degrees warmer than what 32 is actually 32 degrees warmer than the actual ambient air temperature. How does that affect it? That now means the roof of your building, that area just above your building or the top of your building, is now 32 degrees hotter than the ambient air temperature. If you had a white reflective roof, and that could be white TPO, that could be white PVC, there are white EPDMs out there, or even a white coating, it's not going to get as warm. So the heat that is beginning to create and radiate back into the atmosphere with the white cool roof can be a lot cooler than the roofing system if you went with a black or built up roof. Now, the thing I will kind of sidebar and talk about a little bit here, there's a ton of debate, of course, in the industry of white versus black. Do I go with a white roof or a dark roof? A lot of us oftentimes begin to believe that, hey, we live in Michigan. It's cold outside. We get snow in the winter. You know, I need a dark black roof. Well, most of the case studies, or just about all case studies, have shown that even in a climate such as Michigan, we tend to have more cooling days every year than we do heating days every year. So with that, sometimes it says it should be probably more important to go with the white cool roof than it is with the dark roof, because you're going to end up actually having to cool your building more days than you will heat your building, even in great state of Michigan. Now, next thing I want to point out here is also, we look at the heat island effect, is if you look at the parking lot, you will see that the pavement in the parking lot is also a lot warmer than the ambient air temperature and even the white cool roof. So that asphalt road and the asphalt parking lot is registering at about 108 degrees. That puts it at 25 degrees warmer than the ambient air temperature. If you take a second and kind of look at where the grass is, which you'll see the grass in a couple of different shades being green and blue. Some of the changes in grass color that you'll see is due to kind of some dead grass and some alive grass, so the brown grass versus the green grass. But I think the key thing to note here is that, in essence, that grass area or the trees area is a lot cooler than, say, concrete. So having more concrete around your roofing system, around your building and landscape can have effects on that. So when you look at, say, the urban heat island effect, think of how that affects it when you have concrete walls or you have soffit walls for your high rises, your apartment complexes, your office buildings, and how much warmer this area is than an area that is surrounded by more grass and vegetation. So with that, I think we kind of have a good picture of what we see from the heat island effect and how various surfaces can have effects on any particular building or its surrounding environment. So kind of what my focus is a little bit today is really going to talk about the cool roof aspect of combating the heat island effect or heat island effect in urban cores. The most effective to me is looking at things like cool roofs. Cool roofs are highly reflective surfaces that direct the solar heat away from the building and back into the atmosphere or beyond. Cool roofs have been available in the US probably, it says more than 25 years. I can tell you personally that cool roofs have been in the US for more than 40 years. The company I work for, Duralast, founded in 1978, have been manufacturing white membrane since our inception in 78. So cool roofs have been around for a long time. Now, flat roofs, cool roofs, membrane roofs, they're a lot more prevalent also. If you look over to some of our European markets, they have been in this industry for quite some time. So what makes something a cool roof? A cool roof by industry is designed as cool roofing is, say, 50 to 70% of solar heat is reflected away from the building. Now, you can get some membranes where their solar reflectivity is up to, say, 80%, or is even as high as almost 90%. Again, I know our company's solar reflectivity for our standard white membrane is at about an 87% reflectivity initially. Cool roofs can be achieved by using a wide variety of roofing technologies, though. It can be single-ply membranes. It can be cool surface modified asphalt system, or even some metal panels. You can go with a white coating or a white paint system on top of your metal roofing system that makes it more reflective, bouncing the heat away. If you look at the chart to the right, it just kind of gives you a little bit more data on cool roofing systems. It tells you what the International Energy Conservation Code is as of 2012. It means that it must be at least 70% reflective initially. ASHRAE, it says the same thing. Or if you go with Energy Star roofs or the US EPA system, it's at least 65%. California, we won't dig too much into California. As we all know, California is a totally different monster to deal with. But in Southern California, they are really big on reflective roofs. So those for cool roofing, things you want to look at trying to accomplish if you're looking at going with a cool roofing system. Here are what your primary goals should be. Number one, you want to design and construct a watertight roofing system. Your roofing system can be as reflective and as cool as possible, but keep in mind, the most important job of your roofing system is to stop water from getting into your building. Then you want to look at designing and building a superior building with all of its other components. You want to create a healthier environment for occupants. There are some roofing systems where it does use a lot of chemicals and adhesives to install it, which can have high VOC counts and can not be as pleasant for your residents or the people in your building during its installation. You want to create more comfortable environment for occupants. Where I see this a lot is if you have a warehouse, you have a factory, you have a building that might not be cooled off, and it's the summertime. If you have a building and that roof doesn't have insulation, it doesn't have a cool roofing system. We all know these plants and factories and warehouses can get super hot in the middle of summer. And we're trying to run fans and open doors to try to make it cool or comfortable, or at least something that you can manage for your employees and people on the inside. A great solution could be adding a little insulation, as well as going with the cool roofing system. By having that cooler roof, it will not get as hot inside of your warehouse, factory, or plant. And the last thing is, if possible, you want to start looking at solutions where you can save the owner and building operator money and some trouble and hassle in the long run. So some of the features of cool roofs. Insulation is from 25 to 50% more effective. So you want to look at what the insulation is on your building. If you have a conditioned airspace building, Michigan's building code is that you have to be at least a R30 in your insulation. That's the first place you want to start, is how much insulation do I have on my current building and what do I want to go up to? I would say try to make sure you're shooting for an R30 insulation at least. If you have a cool roof, believe it or not, it actually helps improve the efficiency of your HVAC equipment. Your HVAC equipment works better, of course, under cooler environments than super hot environments. So if you think back quickly to the graph I showed you on the rooftop showing the difference between a dark roof and a cool roof and the ambient air temperature of the roof, imagine 83 degrees outside is 87 degrees there if you have a white roofing system versus 115 degrees with a black roofing system. Your HVAC equipment on the white roofing system only needs to take the ambient air temperature from, say, 87 degrees down to, if you keep it at 70, that's 17 degrees it must change. If it's a black roof and now it's 115 degrees on your roofing system, it has over 45, it has about 45 degrees. It must change that ambient air temperature to get it down to 70 degrees to make it work. That means there's more stress, more workload on your HVAC system, which can shorten its life efficiency, your lifespan. So features of a cool roof: ambient interior temperatures can be about 15 to 20% cooler than outside if you have a cool roof system. Your workers' performance can increase in temperatures from 70 to 71. And once you start to get above 73, 74%, people begin to be irritated and you lose the effectiveness of your employees. The other thing to look at is also, by having a cool roof, you reduce your use and consumption of energy during peak demand. So of course, if you were consumers of DTE during the middle of the day trying to cool your building, those are peak hours when your energy rates are higher. You can now have a cooler building, spending less money on your energy during peak demand. So things to consider. Couple of things that we look at when we're looking at cool roofs are either white membrane roof to give you a cool roof. We start looking at solar systems on top of our roofs, and then we start looking at, say, green or vegetative roofs. Number one, if you're going to put a solar system or some type of green vegetative system on your roof, you want to make sure that the life expectancy of your roof matches the life expectancy of your solar system or green vegetative system. What you don't want to do is put a 15-year roofing system on with a 30-year solar system. Now 15 years in, 20 years in, you need to change out your roof, but your solar system is still good, and you have to pay somebody to come lift your solar system out of the way or your vegetative roof out of the way to come install you a new roof. Try to make sure you're getting with your roofing team as you're looking at solar or vegetative to make sure you're going to have a roofing system that match. Very rarely do you ever want to try to consider putting a solar system over an already existing roofing system, because that life expectancy may only now be 10, 5 years, or you only have a couple of years left on that roofing system, and it's expensive to remove solar and vegetative systems to install a new roof. The next thing to look at is weight load of the pedals or racking system of your solar system or your green roofing system. I always recommend, if you're going to install a solar system or a racking system over top, look at adding some type of hardboard, covered board over top of your insulation, which gives it more strength and stability to prevent the weight of this system from weighing in and starting to crush your solar system. Starting to crush your insulation. You want to consider the effects of the ambient temperature or the surface of your roof on your HVAC equipment and any other rooftop units that you have, because the cooler you can keep it up there, the better and more efficient they can work for you. And the last thing that I'll say is the ease of maintenance and repair. If somehow you develop a leak in your system, you want to make sure that you have a solar system set up or your vegetative system set up in a way where it's easy to access the underneath roofing system to make any type of maintenance, repairs, or make it watertight again. Because if not, it can be expensive to have someone come out, remove these systems, and make any necessary repairs. A couple other things that is not on the screen to consider. DTE and Consumers Energy typically have cool energy rebates. They're not oftentimes discussed, but there is the possibility of having getting an energy rebate for installing additional insulation over your old system, and as well as going with a Cool Michigan roofing system by having a white reflective roof. There are energy rebates offered by Consumers and DTE. Improvement of your solar performance. You can actually get improved solar performance by going with the cool reflective roof. By having the cooler there, the solar system can now work more efficient, as well as is not competing for the sun's power like you would if you had a dark roofing system. If you're going with a green vegetative roof, also make sure you consider, or you're talking this in the design of the system with your roofing and vegetative roofing team. Water drainage. How is the water going to effectively drain off your roof? And then if you're trying to figure out how to capture rainwater, make sure that it's not going to pick up anything from the roofing system chemically that's going to have an adverse effect on whatever vegetation you try to water with your required water. And then the last thing I'll say as I wrap up for today, or before we go to conclusion, is take a look to see what requirements there are in your urban cores. Many urban cores are now instituting a tax incentive or a tax penalty or some type of requirement where if you're changing out your roofing system, you must go with a cool reflective roof or some type of vegetative system. You're going to want to know what those requirements are or what penalties there may be if you choose to go with something different. So in conclusion, architects have been a long leader in reducing heat and air conditioning burnings caused by buildings. So have these discussions with your architects. And installing a cool reflective roof deflects solar heat from reaching into your building, thus reducing your cooling needs. That's what I have for today on discussing cool roofs. Are there any questions from anybody?
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, one just came up from Bob. Does solar or a vegetative roof assembly increase the life expectancy of the white roof membrane? And if so, by approximately how much longer?
So I'll say this. I don't know much that solar actually decreases it, but in general, anytime you have a system kind of overtopped that will protect your roofing system from the environment and the effects of the sun, you can begin to increase your life expectancy. The sun is a very, 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 very powerful resource, and it beaming down on your roof or any material known to man begins to wear on it. So if you have a vegetative system or something over top of it, kind of protecting it and blocking the sun rays from hitting it all day, every day, you can increase the life expectancy of it. I don't think that there's anything out there right now that gives us any data or numbers, but I can tell you it absolutely increases the life expectancy.
Thank you. I didn't see any other questions in the chat, but I had a question. In one of your earlier slides, you mentioned that there was a lot of, well, we all know there's a lot of development happening in Detroit. I just saw on the news this morning, Olympia proposing a hotel next to the stadium, Little Caesars Arena. Yeah. So in your experience, have you seen that the majority of new development is putting on cool roofs, or do you still see a lot of other roofs being installed even on the new buildings? And you also mentioned other jurisdictions having rules around new development and requiring cool roofs, and I wonder if that's a policy that comes from the municipality, or maybe something that Detroit could look into.
So Detroit does have something similar to that in place. I didn't pull it up for today, and I should have, but there are a lot of municipalities that have where the city itself requires within certain areas that you go with a cool roof or a vegetative roof. I know Toronto absolutely has one where their requirement is you must go with the vegetative roof. If you don't, there's a very small difference in like the penalty or whatever for if you go with the cool roof, and if you choose something different, there is. Now, how it's instituted widely ranges. Some of them go from it affects your taxes on your building, where you may receive tax breaks for going with the cool roof or a vegetative roof, or some of them actually have a penalty if you don't. But there are a lot of them around the country. If you look it up, I think there's over 63 of them in place around the U.S. And
Yeah,
I forgot what the first part of your question was.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that. Yeah, very interesting.
Oh, the first part of your question was about what are we seeing in the current economic development. You are seeing a lot more buildings go up with single plies and white membrane or reflective roofs, or going with cool roofs. You're seeing a lot of vegetative roofs come out because they're getting definitely more popular. And to be honest, they're a lot better to look at. Who would rather look at, trees, grass, and some flowers versus a flat white roof or a flat black roof?
Exactly. Yes. Well, that's great to hear. Thank you for your presentation. I want to make sure we have time for Dan's presentation. So we'll continue to enter any questions you have for Sam and for Dan. And then at the end, if we have time, we will open it up for more questions then. So Dan, while you're getting your screens up, I just want to introduce Dan again, Dan Henderson from Michigan Solar Solutions. He's going to be giving a presentation on solar PV, a multi-value stream asset. With the growing adoption of solar PV, this presentation will uncover the many value streams and ancillary benefits that a solar array can provide. So thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Kendall. And Sam, great job on your presentation. It was really informative, and I thought that thermal image was pretty cool. So thanks for sharing that. And thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your day and schedule to sit down for this lunch and learn. And it'll be time well spent. So before I talk about the multi-value streams that solar will present, I want to talk a little bit about who is Michigan Solar Solutions. So since our formation in 2007, we've installed well over 7 megawatts of solar here in the great state of ours. We are a behind-the-meter engineering, procurement, and construction. So we do a turnkey installation process. We handle residential, commercial, and industrial. And in our 15-year tenure, we have surpassed and become the highest rated and most trusted installer in the state. But enough about us. Let's talk about solar and how it works and kind of get a little bit more dialogue around that. So what we would be leveraging is a program called distributed generation within these utility programs. And the way that this works is we install solar on the business or the home, and when the sun's shining, we convert that sunlight into usable electricity. It will first be generated in direct current or DC. So we will feed this into an inverter, whether that inverter be a main head end unit on the exterior of the home, kind of like the example shown here, or it could be a microinverter solution where each panel has its own inverter, and that converts it over to alternating current that is then fed into your meter. And just like any form of electricity, it looks for the least path of resistance. In this case, self-use. It's going to look for any load or consumption in your home, just like the utility does now, and want to satisfy or negate that load first and foremost. Now, there will be times when more power is produced than consuming, especially if, during those summer hours, we're stepped away from the home for a few hours. In that instance, if there's nowhere to go in the home because we're already satisfying all the loads and negating that usage from the utility, we would push that power back to the utility. It will be recognized in the form of a future billing credit that can be applied towards electrical charges down the road. That's all part of the interconnection process that we facilitate. And then there, of course, are tax incentives on an asset such as this. The most well-known is now the reinstated 30% federal tax credit from the Inflation Reduction Act, as it was scheduled to drop to 22% next year. If it's a business purchase, there will also be some depreciations in the form of a federal depreciation and a state level modified accelerated cost recovery system. These can oftentimes be around 40-45% of the total purchase price for a commercial sized project. All right, let's dive into the actual value streams. And the first and foremost is going to be cost savings. But the primary function, it's a cost offset opportunity, not a revenue generator. So if it's going to be a behind the meter solar installation, part of that interconnection process is getting the approval or good graces from the utility. And their stance is that we're allowed to provide a solar array that's going to produce 100% of your annual electric needs. We're not allowed to go larger than that. As the seasonalities we will experience here in Michigan, we are likely to see kind of a arch in production, with the winter months, November, December, January, and February, accounting for about roughly 15% of your annual production. It's the spring, summer, and fall that we really optimize these systems for that production. So what you're seeing here is a ballasted mounted system. So what we do is on these PVC or membrane roof, we actually use something called a slip sheet, and that gets placed down with the racking placed on top of that, so that way there's no roof penetrations and we don't avoid any warranties. And it's often common practice to do a pre-solar installation and a post-solar installation inspection from the roofing manufacturer to keep the warranties in place. Value stream number 2 is going to come in the form of marketing. And I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity here today for businesses, being a green supplier or distributor, being a good steward of Michigan. I love this quote from Mark Haggerty, our founder. And he says, "I know of no other marketing expense other than a solar array that even if the marketing message fell flat, the campaign would still return a profit." And that one really hits home. And with these systems, you're able to have the ability to monitor the production of the asset as well. Value stream number 3 is going to come in the form of compliance. And this could be maybe corporate sustainability goals, supply chain compliance. Maybe you have there's a large organization who's taken ownership of the company, and there's a sustainability push. I've even started to come across and have dialogue with companies where, hey, our largest customers are encouraging renewable energy, and if we don't go down the renewable energy route, we won't necessarily lose that relationship or contract, but we're likely to not get new contracts going forward. So we're starting to see this really become from, automotive. We're seeing, there's Walmart's got Project Gigaton out there. There's a lot of push for sustainability and carbon offset. And this is a great way to hit some of those milestones. Property value increase. So there's been a lot driven around the residential side. And we're seeing that Zillow's got market data-driven to studies showing that an average of about 4.1% increase in a home's resale value. Not as much as being observed on the commercial side. Hopefully more data presents itself, but we are seeing quicker sales of the home or business. Ultimately, it boils down to, hey, if I can operate my business or live in a home that is solar and virtually a much lower electric bill, there's a level of interest there to operate at a reduced rate. And then systems of 150 kilowatt AC rating or less have a property tax exemption. So once we go north of that, we would have some property tax. So that was actually Governor Whitmer had signed that into law and protecting residents. And then I'm going to eloquently label this one as everything else. And I look at this as, environmental emission reduction. Again, going back to being a good steward of of Michigan here, improving local air quality. I just see a lot. Reducing demand on the grid of an aging infrastructure. Goodness, we all know we've seen some power outages here and there. They seem to be growing with the climate change. We've also seen employee satisfaction and retention. Again, it goes back to local air quality, aligning with the interest of your employee or customer base. And then we also do see those industry or site-specific value. I deal with a lot of tier 1, tier 2 automotive suppliers who, hey, the automotive OEs are encouraging us to take a step towards sustainability. So we are seeing a lot of growth from that as well. I want to share with you a case study. This is Jensen Bridge and Supply. This is in Sandusky, Michigan, up in the thumb. And this is a system that is right in that category too, the 150 kilowatt DC system size. So no property tax increase or insurance on the asset, anything like that. We have an estimated year one savings of $29,464 with a lifetime savings of just north of $1.2 million on an asset like this. And during since our July 2022 installation, it has produced 69.2 megawatt hours, which is a large decrease in their carbon footprint is part of their goals. But with that being said, I wanted to turn this more into an open-ended conversation to see what questions may have arisen or any feedback that you may have.
Thanks, Dan. Does anybody have any questions? I mean, feel free to take your mic off mute.
Hey, Dan, this is Bob Matler. How are you?
Great. How you doing, Bob?
Good. Can you just go over that exemption that Governor Whitmer signed into law? It's both for residential and commercial, as I understand it. But
Exactly.
after a certain point, then they start charging you additional SEV?
Yes, great question. So the way it works is there's different categories of solar. We've got what was known as Category 1, which is up to 20 kilowatts DC. And then the Category 2 is going to be up to it's 220 kilowatt DC or 150 kilowatt AC. Just due to conversion, there's some losses. So 150 kilowatt is the allotted size. Anything north of that, that's when property taxes do come into impact or effect here. And likely you would also have insurance on the assets. And then you would no longer be able to outflow for billing credits. So we see a lot of customers stay in that value or the Category 2 due to that value proposition of selling excess generation, but not having those property tax implications.
So give me an idea, on most commercial buildings, are you still able to provide substantial energy savings yet stay below the 150 kilowatt cap?
Absolutely. And in fact, with the way that the distributed generations programs work currently, the true value proposition for solar is going to be generating that power on site and directly consuming it, because when you push that back to the utility, it's a half value credit. So what we do see in these commercial projects are a 10, 13, 15, 20% offset, having a better rate of return than someone that may be a 70, 85% who's going to outflow power for half value credits. So the answer is yes, we do see some substantial power offset. You know, even as much as 20% is still a smaller system, but the savings can compound exponentially. You can still see, you know, 30,000 in savings from their electric spends.
Okay, then the final question. It keeps going back and forth, and I can't remember where we are, but are we unable to sell back to the grid at this point for any type of building?
So you can sell back to the utility company as long as it is mentioned in that Category 2. So as long as we stay below that 150 kilowatt or right there, because when you go into what they would call Category 3, that's that 151 kilowatt and above, you are not allowed to, well, you can push power to the grid. It's just not recognized for credits. It would just be free power being pushed out to the grid.
Okay.
Did that answer the question?
Well, I do have a follow-up, sorry.
Sure.
So if you're able to sell back to the grid, did you say you're selling back at half the price that you would be charged?
Correct. Yes.
Is that the change? Is that the recent change on the amount of the sell back? So
this has been in place for a number of years now, because it was what we would refer to as net metering, where you did get that one-to-one value or credit. But since then, it's been a number of years we've been on what they refer to as distributed generation, and it's roughly about 50 cents on the dollar. So if you're paying 14 cents a kilowatt hour, you get around 7 cents, 7.7 cents as an outflow.
And anything coming down the road from MPSC to change that dynamic?
I certainly hope so, because we have seen, I mean, DT recently requested some different change to solar only rates that would have continued to undervalue solar. So we very much rely on the wonderful folks at MPSC and all that they're doing to get it to a point where we're not undervaluing solar with these buyback rates.
Thanks for letting me ask all those questions.
Bob, you're
Thanks.
welcome to ask anytime.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, and there was another question in the chat too from Kelvin. Dan, can you elaborate more on environmental stewardship?
Yeah, absolutely. What I look at is, the opportunity to offset carbon reduction, and it's really cool. You can actually take, hey, if my solar array is going to produce, 200,000 kilowatt hours this year, you can go to the EPA's website and see that the positive impact of what that solar array or that offset would do just year one alone. It's pretty amazing to see the number of cars off the road or equivalency of that, or trees planted, things of that nature. So it's pretty interesting to see how this is an easy way to directly reduce that carbon consumption.
Yeah, thanks, Dan, for that. As a pastor in the inner city, to help those homeowners to seek out solar panels. What kind of advice can I give the homeowners?
Absolutely. I would say, a big part of this is controlling, your electric spend, because right now we don't really have a lot of say in when the utility companies raise rates, or albeit any control into what we're paying or charging. And I look at this as an opportunity to start to give yourself some sustainability, but also peace of mind, knowing that as we get into increased climate change, and as we've seen severe weather and aging infrastructure of distribution lines, power generation is not the issue. It's always the distribution of getting it to the homes or to the business. So this allows you to have more of that peace of mind that, hey, I'm combating these glaring issues of aged infrastructure and, like I said, growing climate change.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Were there any other questions for Dan or for Sam? I know we still have 4 minutes, or anyone's welcome to stay on after one if you'd like.
And should anybody have any interest in wanting to explore solar, you get a free consultation. I'm happy to do that. Here at Michigan Solar Solutions, we're not a sales-centric organization. So feel free, if you would like, if you know of anybody, I'd be happy to work up a proposal, as I do work in residential and commercial arena as well.
Dan, there was a request in the chat for you and Sam to put your contact information in there so that folks can reach out to you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, could you provide that for everyone?
I'd be happy to do that.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Dan, great presentation. Kendall, thank you so much for making this happen and putting this on. Like Dan, if you need a quote, you need somebody to give you a roof evaluation on your flat membrane roof, please feel free. My contact information is in the email. Is in the chat, whether you call me by my cell phone or you email me. I'll be glad to help you in any way I can. Even if you just have a question or you're looking for some contractors to do some work, feel free to give me a call.
Yes, and Sam, I'd like to exchange contact information with you as well. I think there may be some synergies.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
With roofs and solar.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I believe so, Dan. Please reach out to me outside of this and let's talk.
That'd be great.
Hey, Sam, I had a quick question for you. I don't know if you covered it, but do you know the percentage of commercial buildings that have white roofs in Metro Detroit right now?
I absolutely do not. I don't actually think anybody has the data of that percentage.
Do you think it'd be quite small though, like less than 5%? Or you don't really know?
No, actually, you'd be surprising. It's a lot more than 5%. I think it's way, way, way higher.
Oh, good. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that concludes today's Lunch and Learn. I'm going to stop recording and folks can say hello if you'd like or hop off. But thanks again to our presenters today, and I hope everyone has a great weekend.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, everybody.